Hello, I just wanted to show you a quick video before we get started with our next experiment to show you how the actual LabQuest operates. And I need to do something on my computer. There we go. So here's the LabQuest, and right now you notice that there is a menu on the screen. But as soon as I open up Logger Pro, which is on my desktop, it'll realize that it's communicating with the actual LabQuest and it's ready to collect some data, and you'll get a double-headed arrow on the screen. That's a good sign. That's what you're looking for. If you look at the computer screen, you'll notice that it's just a blank, looks like a spot here for a spreadsheet for data and then a graph, and you notice that my collect button is grayed out. That's an important observation to notice. That means I do not have a probe connected. So as soon as I take my LabQuest and I plug in my temperature probe, you should notice that my collect button will recognize that a probe is detected and it changes to green. So now it's ready to connect. Not only that, but if you take a good look, you notice that it realizes it's a temperature probe, and you see the current temperature down here in the lower left-hand corner, and then we have a graph. If I hit collect, it'll start to take some data. This is super fantastic, except when we're doing a specific experiment like this one, then what we need to do is open up the exact file that is related to this, because the graph may be set up differently. For example, this graph here, its margins go from 0 to 50, and it's set to collect for 150 or 200 seconds. Where if we open up the proper graph, it may be a little bit different. So I come over here to File, Open, and we want to make sure we open up the correct file. Students sometimes mistake and they hit physics with Vernier. We're in physical science. So a quick little double click, and you'll open up the correct experiment. This one happens to be experiment number 1, temperature response. And once we open it up, you should notice that my graph should change its margins a little bit. And it goes from 0 to 100, and it is preset to stop recording after 100 seconds. So that's really, really, really important that you pay attention to the correct file that you need to open up. The other thing I wanted to mention are some of the options that you can do actually with the data itself once it's collected. So I'd like to show you a few things. So here's some data. I'll just warm up my temperature probe a little bit so we get a little change here in the actual data. And if I stop collecting now by pressing the stop button, you notice that the data that I have on my graph matches up with the data that's over here in the data table. That makes sense. If I ever want to know a specific temperature, it's hard to follow, so look real closely at this screen. If I come right up here and I hover over the x equals, that's the examine feature, and if I click on that, wherever I hover on the graph, it gives me that dot. And it'll tell me that exact point, the coordinates of those points. So right now, at the moment when I started to warm it up, it was right about there, which would have been 14 seconds, and the temperature was exactly 24 degrees Celsius. So sometimes I'll ask you to pinpoint some data, and you'll use the examine tool. To close out, you can just click on the X, and it's gone. The next thing I want to show you is an auto scale feature. So right now I stopped collecting and I have this, this amount of graph space with a small amount of data. So if you come on over here next to your zoom, there's this one here that is auto scale. If I click it, it'll stretch out my data to fit the actual window of time that I collected in, and it makes a much nicer looking graph. If for some reason I needed to know the exact slope of this line, there's that feature. In mathematics, the symbol for slope is m, so this feature here says m equals. So if I click on it, it's funny, it gives me, I don't know if you can see the dark line there, but you see a black line on the red line. It's telling me my slope is 0 because my slope is 0. The data is horizontal. But as soon as I start to come up, it makes a line that is tangent with my graph. So at this particular point, my slope is about 1.042. What else do you need to know? You might need a window of time. So if you click and drag over a certain area, I can get the data for that specific area. And then we use this button a lot. This one is called the statistics button. And when you click on it, it will tell you the minimum temperature, the maximum temperature, and the average temperature here as mean for that particular time. So in a lot of our experiments, it will say, figure out the average temperature when, we'll say, something stopped heating up. So here I would select this area here where it's flat and hit stat, and it'll tell me the exact temperature. Oh, maybe it won't. It says it needs additional points. So there's not enough data there for this particular. I can just stretch it out a little bit. So it says there that my average, my mean was 30.65, and that's a lot easier than coming over here to this table and adding all these up and trying to divide by the number of my samples. That's just too much work. Anything else? Labels. Sometimes I may want to put a label on my graph. So I would come in here to Insert, and I want to insert a text annotation. So it gives me a window here, so I'll type moments of heating. Just making up something here. And as soon as I exit out or click off the graph, it gives me this box in the wrong spot. So if I take my mouse and I grab it, click and drag, I can move it wherever I want. Same thing with the arrow itself, and I can label something like that. If I don't want a text box with an arrow and I just wanted text, I can say insert text, and it just gives me a text window that I could put over my graph, and say, this graph represents and blah 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 blah, and then that would show up, or should show up, on my graphic itself. It's just another choice. Last bit of information for you is printing. If you ever need to print your graph, you can just go right into the print menu, and it's pretty interesting. If you choose print footer, you can add your name, which is helpful when everyone's graph looks the same. You can add a comment, and that's kind of important. Click OK. The other thing you can choose, if we hit cancel, is File. Under the print options, you can choose to print just the data table or print just the graph. And that's pretty helpful because sometimes you don't want all this extra stuff over here. You're just really interested into the graph. So I think I covered all the features I need you to know. Once again, we had auto scale, we had examine, we had slope, and we had statistics, as well as how to print. I do have one more. I apologize. If I ever need to change my margins, I can just click and drag on them. Or what I could do, if I'm not using auto scale, is I could change this to any value I want. So if I wanted to see a much larger range of temperatures, I brought it all the way up to 300, and you don't see much of a change. If I go back to auto scale, it'll put me right back to the best looking graph for that particular segment. Okay, that's it. Good luck out there.